I bent over and gave him a kiss, and he grabbed me, and he said to me that, "You are my son."
For 30 years, it sat locked away in complete darkness. A storage unit in Burbank, California, rented under a fake identity. The rent was paid in cash every single month until the day Sammy Davis Jr. died. No one knew it existed. No one had ever touched it. When investigators finally forced open that metal door in 1991, they expected to find some old costumes, maybe a few forgotten photographs. Instead, they discovered something that would shake Hollywood to its core. Inside were letters revealing explosive family secrets, tapes of private conversations that could end careers, and documented proof of what really happened during his forbidden romance with Kim Novak in 1958, the relationship that nearly cost him his life. But that wasn't all. Hidden beneath layers of memorabilia were records of his involvement with the Church of Satan, photographs from occult rituals, and evidence of the dark spiritual journey that nearly destroyed him. There were also documents revealing the true parentage of his adopted children, secrets so explosive that they would tear his family apart decades after his death. This wasn't just memorabilia. It was 30 years of carefully hidden truth, and it's finally coming to light. Samuel George Davis Jr. was born on December 8, 1925, in Harlem, New York. His father, Sammy Davis Sr., was a vaudeville performer, and his mother, Elvira Sanchez, was a talented dancer at the Apollo Theater. But here's what most people never knew. His mother was actually Afro-Cuban, born in New York to Cuban immigrants in 1905. The family kept this heritage completely secret. During the height of anti-Cuban sentiment in America, especially during the Cold War tensions of the 1960s, revealing Cuban roots could destroy a career overnight. So Sammy told everyone his mother was Puerto Rican from San Juan. Even in death, he protected this family secret. Until that storage unit was open. Elvira was more than just a performer. She was a stunning beauty who had caught the eye of many men in the entertainment world. But her relationship with Sammy Sr. was tumultuous from the start. She was ambitious, independent, and refused to be tied down by the conventional expectations of motherhood in the 1920s. By age 2, Sammy was already performing with the Will Maston Trio, led by his father and family friend, Will Maston. While other toddlers played with toys, Sammy danced and sang on stages across America. He never went to school like other children. His classroom was the road. His teachers were the audiences who cheered him on. The spotlight became his entire world, but it came at a devastating cost. He lost his childhood forever. At age 3, his parents divorced. His mother left for good, and Sammy rarely saw her again. This abandonment would haunt him for the rest of his life, creating an insatiable need for approval and love that no amount of applause could ever fill. Will Maston became like a godfather to him. But even his protection couldn't shield the boy from the ugly reality of 1920s America. Sammy witnessed the whites-only signs, felt the sting of racial discrimination, and learned early that his talent was his only weapon against hate. But there was something else that set him apart. An almost supernatural ability to win over any audience, no matter how hostile. Even as a small child, he possessed a magnetism that transcended race, age, and prejudice. By age 7, Sammy was already making movies. He appeared in Rufus Jones for President, alongside Ethel Waters, playing a young boy who becomes president. The film was groundbreaking. It dared to imagine a black child in the White House at a time when segregation ruled America. But it was also prophetic. hinting at the barrier-breaking career that lay ahead. The movie industry noticed him immediately. Here was a child who could sing, dance, act, and command attention with an intensity that was almost unsettling. Studio executives whispered about his potential, but they also worried about the complications his race would bring. As he grew older, Sammy taught himself multiple languages, mastered numerous instruments, and developed skills that would make him legendary. Drums, trumpet, piano, vibraphone, he could play them all. He could mimic voices, do impressions, tell jokes, dance, and even perform gun tricks. This versatility would later earn him the nickname Mr. Show Business. But his talent came with a price: the constant performing, the pressure to be perfect, the need to prove himself over and over again. It was exhausting. By his teenage years, Sammy was already showing signs of the addictive personality that would plague him later in life. He smoked constantly, drank when he could get away with it, and developed an almost compulsive need to be the center of attention. But in 1943, everything changed. At just 18 years old, weighing only 120 pounds and standing 5'6", Sammy was drafted into the U.S. Army. He left the safety of the stage and entered a world that was far crueler than anything he had experienced in show business. The Army nearly broke him. The racism he faced was beyond brutal. White soldiers painted him white from head to toe, mocking everything he was. They tricked him into drinking beer laced with urine. Some nights, they urinated on him while he slept. They broke his nose 3 times. They would scrawl racial slurs on his forehead before forcing him to perform for their entertainment. The psychological torture was relentless. They would make him dance at gunpoint, calling him names that cut deeper than any physical blow. They forced him to clean latrines with his bare hands while they watched and laughed. They would wake him in the middle of the night just to humiliate him in new and creative ways. The worst night came when soldiers tied him to a tree in freezing cold. He stood there helpless, like so many victims of racial terror before him. The cold cut into his skin, but the message cut deeper. No matter how talented you are, remember your place. That night, hypothermia nearly killed him. He was found hours later, barely conscious, his body blue from the cold. One savage beating left him hospitalized for 3 days. He lay in that hospital bed thinking of ending his life. The weight of constant hate had nearly crushed his spirit. He had a loaded pistol hidden in his belongings, a gift from a sympathetic fellow soldier. For hours, he stared at that gun, wondering if death would be easier than another day of torment. But somehow, he found the strength to fight back with the only weapons he had: his voice, his dancing, his undeniable talent. When Sammy joined the Army's entertainment unit, even the men who hated him couldn't deny his gift. Their applause became his power, their admiration his revenge. Years later, in that storage unit, investigators would find Sammy's Army journal, pages and pages of his innermost thoughts during those dark days. The entries revealed a young man on the edge of breakdown, but also one who was developing the iron will that would carry him to stardom. When Sammy returned from military service in 1951, he was ready to conquer the world. The opportunity came at Kairos, the most glamorous nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. On March 1951, the Will Maston Trio opened for Janice Page. The performance was magical, but what happened after the Academy Awards that year was legendary. The room filled with Hollywood royalty: Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, and Judy Garland. They watched in stunned silence as Sammy delivered a performance that transformed him from performer to superstar overnight. He didn't just sing and dance, he seemed to channel every emotion: every experience, every moment of pain and triumph into pure art. Frank Sinatra, who was in the audience that night, later said it was the greatest single performance he had ever witnessed. The kid didn't just entertain us, Sinatra recalled. He possessed us. For 45 minutes, every person in that room forgot about color, forgot about prejudice, forgot about everything except pure talent. The buzz was unstoppable. Bookings flooded in. Television offers arrived. Major record labels started a bidding war. Sammy Davis Jr. had officially arrived in Hollywood, but success brought new challenges and new dangers. Just when everything seemed perfect, disaster struck. On November 19, 1954, 29-year-old Sammy was driving his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. He had been performing at the Sands Hotel and was exhausted from 3 shows in one night. On Highway 66, another car suddenly backed into his lane. The crash was devastating. The car's horn button was forced directly into his left eye. The accident was more severe than initially reported. Sammy's skull was fractured in 3 places. He suffered internal bleeding and went into shock. For several hours, doctors weren't sure he would survive. When he finally regained consciousness, the first thing he asked for wasn't his eye. It was his voice. "Can I still sing?" He whispered through the pain. He was rushed to community hospital, but doctors couldn't save the eye. Many thought his career was over. A one-eyed black entertainer in 1950s America seemed impossible to imagine. The entertainment industry, which had just begun to accept him, started backing away. Contracts were quietly canceled. Phone calls went unreturned. But 8 weeks later, Sammy proved them all wrong. He returned to Cairo's stage, dazzling Hollywood once again. That first performance back was electric with tension. No one knew what to expect. Would he be diminished? Would the accident have broken his spirit? Instead, they witnessed something extraordinary. Sammy had transformed his tragedy into triumph. The eye patch became part of his mystique. He joked about it, incorporated it into his act, and turned what could have been a career-ending disability into just another aspect of his larger-than-life persona. That accident changed more than his appearance. It changed his soul. While recovering, he read about the Jewish people's long struggle to survive. A friend, Eddie Cantor, had given him a mezuzah and talked about faith. Sammy felt a deep connection to the history of persecution and survival. But his conversion to Judaism in 1960 was more complex than most people knew. In that storage unit, investigators found Sammy's personal spiritual journals, documenting his deep study of Jewish texts, his meetings with rabbis, and his genuine struggle to understand his place in the world. The conversion wasn't just symbolic. It was intensely personal. Sammy learned Hebrew, studied the Talmud, and even contemplated moving to Israel at one point. He saw parallels between Jewish suffering and black suffering in America, and believed that embracing Judaism would make him stronger, not weaker. Many mocked him for the conversion, including some in the black community who felt he was trying to distance himself from his race. But Sammy persisted, joking that he was a one-eyed Negro who's Jewish. He found strength in the identity, and it became central to who he was. In 1941, when Sammy was just 15 years old, he met Frank Sinatra. Frank was 26 and touring with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. The moment Frank saw Sammy perform in Detroit, he knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. Their friendship was deeper than most people realized. In private letters found in the storage unit, Frank wrote to Sammy about his own struggles with rejection and failure. They bonded over their shared experiences as outsiders. Frank as an Italian-American in a WASP-dominated industry, Sammy as a black man in a white world. Frank became more than a friend. He became Sammy's protector and advocate. When Sammy was turned away from the Copacabana in New York because of his race, Frank was furious. He demanded Sammy return the next night, and this time, Frank walked in with him, sat at the same table, and refused gigs at any club that wouldn't treat Sammy as an equal. This friendship would later make Sammy a member of the legendary Rat Pack, but it also gave him access to a world of power, influence, and danger that would both elevate and ultimately corrupt him. By the late 1950s, Sammy was earning up to $25,000 a week in Las Vegas, about $250,000 today. But even as he packed theaters, he couldn't stay in the hotels where he performed. Segregation forced him to stay miles away on the west side of town, in shabby motels that were a stark contrast to the glamorous venues where he entertained white audiences. The humiliation was constant and deliberate. He would perform for standing ovations, then be escorted out the back door like a common criminal. He couldn't eat in the restaurants, couldn't gamble in the casinos, couldn't even use the main restrooms. The message was clear. You can entertain us, but you're not one of us. Sammy refused to accept it. He became the first black entertainer to get free room and board at the Frontier Hotel, but it came at a cost. He had to agree to certain restrictions. No gambling in the main casino during peak hours, no socializing with white guests, no appearances in the hotel restaurants during dinner service. He kept pushing, supporting civil rights protests, and eventually buying a stake in the Tropicana. When Nevada passed a law in 1971 ending hotel discrimination, it was partly because of Sammy's relentless fight. But the battle took its toll, contributing to the drinking and drug use that would later consume him. In 1957, Sammy fell in love with Kim Novak, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. They met on The Steve Allen Show, and their connection was immediate and intense. Tony Curtis, who was friends with both, set up secret meetings at his house, watching as they fell deeper into conversation and, eventually, love. Their relationship was passionate and dangerous. Kim was everything Sammy wasn't supposed to want: white, famous, and completely off limits. But she was also intelligent, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. She saw past his fame to the wounded man underneath. They would meet in secret at a Malibu beach house, spending entire weekends talking, laughing, and planning a future that seemed impossible. Kim later revealed that Sammy had proposed to her, and she had said yes. They were making plans to move to Europe, where interracial marriage was more accepted. But interracial relationships in 1950s America were not just taboo, they were dangerous. Only 4% of Americans approved of black-white marriages. The memory of Emmett Till's lynching was still fresh. Sammy and Kim had to hide their relationship completely. He would hide under blankets in cars. They met secretly at a Malibu beach house. In January 1958, gossip columnist Dorothy Kilgallen falsely reported they were engaged. The news exploded across America. Studios panicked. Columbia Pictures head Harry Cohn, who had deep ties to organized crime, took immediate action. Chicago mobster John Roselli delivered a terrifying message to Davis: end the relationship with Kim Novak, or lose his remaining eye, or worse. Some accounts say Davis was actually kidnapped for hours as a scare tactic. Even mob boss Sam Giancana, whom Sammy turned to for protection, said he couldn't help him in Hollywood. The threats were specific and chilling. They would kill Kim first, making sure Sammy watched. Then they would take his remaining eye. Finally, they would make sure he never performed again by destroying his hands and voice. The mob wasn't just threatening his life, they were threatening to erase his entire existence. Faced with threats on his life and Kim's, Sammy made the most heartbreaking decision of his life. On January 7, 1958, he ended his relationship with Kim. 3 days later, on January 10th, he married Lorraine White, a black singer from Las Vegas, paying her between $10,000 and $25,000 to participate in the sham marriage. That wedding night was devastating. Sammy drank heavily and became so distraught, he tried to strangle Lorraine in the car. His friend Arthur Silber had to restrain him. Later that night, Silber found Sammy alone in his hotel room, holding a gun to his head. The marriage lasted until April, just 4 months of misery to save his life. In 1960, Sammy found real love again with May Britt, a Swedish actress. An outsider to American racial politics, May didn't understand why race should keep her from the person she loved. Their planned wedding at Temple Israel of Hollywood had to be moved to Sammy's home after the synagogue received bomb threats. Frank Sinatra and Peter Lawford stood as witnesses on November the 13th, 1960. Both Sammy and May had converted to Judaism before the ceremony. The price for their courage was steep. Swastikas appeared on their property. May lost her contract with 20th Century Fox, and Sammy was disinvited from President Kennedy's 1961 inauguration. They had a daughter, Tracy, in 1961, and later adopted 2 sons, Mark and Jeff. But documents found in the storage unit would later reveal that at least one of these adoptions was actually Sammy's biological child from an affair. A secret he took to his grave. The constant pressure, Sammy's endless touring, and his affair with singer Lola Falana led to their divorce in 1968 after 8 years of marriage. May later revealed that the final straw wasn't just the affair. It was finding evidence of Sammy's involvement with occult practices that terrified her. After his divorce from May, Sammy's world collapsed. He sank into drugs and alcohol. Cocaine and amyl nitrite became his escape, but he also began exploring darker spiritual territory that would shock even his closest friends. In 1968, at his nightclub, The Factory, Sammy was invited to a party by a group of young actors sporting red fingernails, the sign of the Church of Satan. Founded by Anton LaVey in San Francisco, the church combined ancient paganism with the philosophy of indulgence over abstinence. What happened at that first party was kept secret for decades, but documents in the storage unit revealed the truth. It wasn't just a gathering. It was a full satanic ritual, complete with nude altars, blood ceremonies, and sexual acts that were filmed for LaVey's private collection. Sammy was fascinated and horrified in equal measure. Here was a religion that celebrated the very things Christianity condemned: materialism, lust, pride, and rebellion against authority. For a man who had been told his entire life to know his place, it was intoxicating. His barber, Jay Sebring, was one of the ritual leaders. Sebring, who would later be murdered alongside Sharon Tate by the Manson family, introduced Sammy to LaVey personally. Soon, Sammy was attending regular meetings and was even offered a senior position in the church hierarchy. For several years, Sammy wore a painted fingernail and displayed the sign of the horns during his performances. He began incorporating occult imagery into his shows and even starred in a pilot called Poor Devil, where he played a demon trying to work his way out of hell. But the deeper Sammy went into these practices, the more disturbed he became. In his personal journal, found in the storage unit, he wrote about nightmares, paranoid delusions, and a growing sense that he had made a terrible mistake. By 1974, he had quietly distanced himself from the church, though he maintained friendships with several members. Perhaps the most explosive contents of the storage unit were documents revealing the true parentage of Sammy's adopted children. While Tracy was clearly his biological daughter with May Britt, the situation with his sons was far more complicated. Mark Davis, adopted in 1963, had always suspected he was Sammy's biological child. Documents in the storage unit confirmed this. He was the result of an affair Sammy had during his marriage to May. To protect his marriage and career, Sammy passed Mark off as an adoption. On his deathbed in 1990, Sammy finally told Mark the truth. "You are my son." But this revelation, which should have brought peace, only created more questions. If Mark was his biological son, who was his mother? May Britt denied giving birth to him, and the identity of his biological mother remained a mystery. In 2015, Mark and Tracy agreed to a DNA test on live television. The results were shocking. They weren't biologically related. This meant that while Sammy had acknowledged Mark as his son, the truth was even more complex than anyone imagined. The storage unit contained letters suggesting that Mark might have been the son of a prominent white actress who had an affair with Sammy in the late 1950s. To protect everyone involved, the child was given up and later adopted by Sammy and May. The actress's identity was never revealed, even in Sammy's private papers. Despite earning around $50 million during his career, sometimes making $185,000 in a single night, Sammy's gambling addiction and generous nature left him broke. Unlike Frank Sinatra, whose debts were often forgiven, Sammy had to pay every penny he lost. He could blow $40,000 in one night at the tables. But it wasn't just gambling that destroyed his finances. Bad business deals, questionable tax shelters, and his habit of supporting many people financially added to his troubles. He was generous to a fault, unable to say no to anyone with a sob story. The storage unit contained evidence of some of these deals: contracts for nightclubs that never opened, investments in films that were never made, and loans to friends who never paid him back. There were also receipts showing that Sammy had quietly supported numerous charities and individuals, often anonymously. When he died in 1990, he owed the IRS over $7 million, about $13 million today. His estate was worth around $4 million, but the IRS took it all to pay what was owed. In 1987, Sammy reunited with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin for what they called the Farewell Tour. This wasn't the small nightclubs of the past. They performed in massive arenas holding 10,000 to 25,000 people. After Dean left due to health issues, Liza Minnelli joined, and they continued touring until May 1989. But Sammy's real battle began in August 1989 when he started losing his sense of taste. His throat felt constantly sore. Doctors delivered devastating news: throat cancer. Years of smoking up to 4 packs a day had caught up with him. Sammy faced an impossible choice: let surgeons remove his voice box to save his life, or try radiation to keep singing. He chose his voice. After 8 brutal weeks of treatment, the tumor seemed to shrink, and Sammy even returned to the stage a few times. But by early 1990, the cancer was back and spreading rapidly. His final performance was at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, the same venue where he had broken racial barriers decades earlier. He could barely whisper, but he insisted on performing. The audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted 15 minutes. Many were crying, knowing they were witnessing the end of an era. On May 16, 1990, at age 64, Sammy Davis Jr. died at his Beverly Hills home. His weight had dropped to just 60 pounds, and he could barely whisper. But his final words, according to Altavise, were not of regret, but of gratitude. "I had a good run." When Sammy died, the full extent of his financial ruin became clear. Despite earning millions, his $4 million estate went entirely to the IRS to pay his $7 million tax debt. Alteweis was left with nothing but legal battles that would last for years. In September 1991, over 1,800 people gathered in Los Angeles for the heartbreaking auction of Sammy's belongings. His gold record for the Candyman sold for $4,575. His tap shoes brought in $11,000. People even bought his jewelry, scrapbooks, walking sticks, and hats. The auction raised $439,000, barely making a dent in that massive tax bill. But then came the twist no one expected. In late 1991, a 28-year-old man named Matthias Herenchik received a strange bill for $365 for a storage unit he'd never rented. His ID had been stolen. When the storage company investigated and found the unit had been rented with fake information, they called police, fearing it might contain drugs or dangerous materials. What they found inside was shocking. Sammy Davis Jr.'s personal treasures that had somehow escaped the auction. A trumpet, an antique record player, a jukebox with the Candyman, clothing, documents, and photographs. Someone had rented that unit just 2 weeks after the auction, using stolen ID and cash payments to hide the items from the IRS. Police learned that an employee of Alteweis had helped stash the items, claiming he was trying to save what was left from the IRS seizure. The plan was simple: keep paying in cash, and no one would ever know. But when one payment was missed, 30 years of secrets came spilling out. According to sources close to the investigation, the storage unit contained more than just memorabilia. There were private letters revealing family secrets that Sammy had kept hidden his entire life. Tapes of conversations between Sammy and powerful Hollywood figures. Recordings that could have damaged careers and reputations if they had ever been made public. Most shocking of all were documents related to his relationship with Kim Novak and the mob threats that ended it. Sammy had apparently documented everything: the kidnapping, the threats, the forced marriage, and the people behind it all. There were photographs of his meeting with mobsters, recordings of threatening phone calls, and even a detailed account of the night he almost killed himself. The storage unit also contained evidence of his involvement with the Church of Satan, photographs from rituals, correspondence with Anton LaVey, and a detailed journal of his spiritual journey into darkness and back. These documents revealed a man struggling with faith, identity, and the price of fame. Perhaps most disturbing were the medical records and psychiatric evaluations that showed the toll his lifestyle had taken. There were reports of multiple suicide attempts, documented evidence of his drug addiction, and detailed accounts of the physical and emotional abuse he had suffered throughout his life. The IRS seized everything, hoping to recover more money for the tax debt. Alteweis claimed she knew nothing about the hidden storage unit. This discovery became just another painful chapter in the tragic story of a man whose immense talent was ultimately overshadowed by financial ruin and loss. The storage unit discovery had unexpected consequences for Sammy's children. Documents found inside confirmed suspicions that had plagued the family for decades. Mark Davis, who had always believed he was Sammy's biological son, found proof in a letter Sammy had written, but never sent to May Britt. The letter, dated 1963, revealed that Mark was indeed Sammy's biological child, born from an affair with a white actress whose identity Sammy swore to protect. The adoption was a cover story to preserve everyone's reputation and career. Tracy Davis, who died in 2020, spent her final years trying to reconcile with her father's complex legacy. She wrote a book about their relationship, describing both the love and the pain of being Sammy Davis Jr.'s daughter. The storage unit discoveries vindicated many of her memories and suspicions about her father's secret life. Jeff Davis remained largely silent about his father's revelations, but Manny Davis, Sammy's youngest son from his marriage to Alta Vise, became the family spokesperson and estate administrator. He has worked to preserve his father's legacy while acknowledging the complicated truth of who Sammy really was. Today, Sammy Davis Jr.'s face still appears on casino walls and billboards throughout Las Vegas. The city that once rejected him now honors him like royalty. When he died, Las Vegas dimmed its lights for 1 minute, a fitting tribute to the man who helped break down its racial barriers. His hit songs like The Candy Man, which reached #1 in 1972, and I've Got to Be Me, which became his personal anthem, continue to inspire new generations. His story reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable hatred and discrimination, talent, determination, and courage can change the world. But that storage unit discovery reminds us that even legends have secrets. For 30 years, Sammy's hidden truth sat locked away in the darkness. When it finally came to light, it revealed not just memorabilia, but the documented proof of a man who survived hatred, broke barriers, and paid the ultimate price for daring to love and live on his own terms. The vault is empty now, its secrets scattered to the wind. But the story of what was inside and why Sammy felt he had to hide it continues to fascinate and inspire. It shows us that behind the glittering facade of show business lies a human story of struggle, triumph, and ultimately, the price of fame. Sammy Davis Jr. was more than an entertainer. He was a symbol of resilience, a breakthrough artist who opened doors for generations to come, and a complex human being who carried the weight of history on his shoulders. The secrets in that storage unit don't diminish his legacy. They make it more human, more real, and ultimately more powerful. What other Hollywood legends kept storage units full of secrets? What other truths are sitting in warehouses around the world, waiting for someone to miss a payment and change history forever? Only time will tell, and we at Vintage Vault will be there to reveal it for you. Subscribe, and until next time, take care.